When I was 10, my father took me on my first camping trip. Uncle Ray and my grandfather came along too. Before leaving the site to drive home, I remember asking them why the police had shown up. My father told me Uncle Ray had stumbled upon some equipment in the woods, and not knowing who it belonged to, he just wanted to do the right thing. Dad didn't really lie to me. His truth was extremely vague, though. There's a lot more to the story. Here are the most important parts. By his own admission, my grandfather used to be born, but after he recovered from back surgery and the subsequent infection, he turned a new leaf. He traded in his sedan for a pickup truck, and all of a sudden he was an outdoorsman. No longer did he spend snowy Sunday mornings listening to classical music. He began picking me up and driving over to the mall before it opened, just to do donuts in the parking lot in his new truck. And it was our little secret. My grandfather started advocating for Dad to get me into sports, so my parents signed me up for swimming lessons. But Granddad said that wasn't physical enough. Him and Mom went back and forth about enrolling me in Little League football. Somehow, allowing my grandfather to buy me a hatchet was the middle ground he settled on. And though it was mine, I only got to touch it once, on my 10th birthday. Since then, my father kept it high on a shelf in his garage. I kept bugging him about getting to use it for the first time. When he couldn't take it any longer, he cleared his schedule one weekend for our camping trip. It was just my luck I caught a cold the night before. We still went, but I wasn't feeling 100%. So when Granddad and Uncle Ray went hiking, Dad and I went to the store to get supplies for dinner. When we got back to the site, Uncle Ray was acting strange, and all of a sudden everyone was being so secretive. I had to sit in Granddad's truck with the music up loud while each of them talked on their phones outside. If I would have had more strength, I would have been more inquisitive. But before long, I fell asleep. When I woke back up, my relatives were talking to police. I counted 5 police cars and figured it had to be something serious. That's why Dad's story about just some equipment never sat right with me. While on their hike, Granddad and Uncle Ray heard a woman's screams coming from the nearby forest. They decided to investigate, walking closer and yelling back, trying to pinpoint her location. The only words the two of them could clearly make out were her saying "down here," and then the screaming stopped. They searched around the area for a bit until they came across a trap door buried in the dirt. There was nothing but heavy stones holding it shut. My uncle and grandfather proceeded underground, expecting to rescue some unfortunate soul who got entrapped. Instead, they found a psychopath's funhouse. It was a bunker of some sort. There were numerous rifles hanging on the walls. The giant wooden table was lined with saws and other cutting instruments, and it was covered with red stains, some old, some new. There were wires running along the floor to a powered-off TV screen. Next to the wires sat dozens of trash bags full of outfits and costumes. The only light came from 2 overhead lamps, and they buzzed louder than the pair of deep freezers sitting in the corner. Everything combined made for a rather unsettling scene. The police set up a stakeout. They monitored the area for weeks for any activity, but no one else ever showed up again. The bunker was cleaned out and eventually sealed off. According to the report, the freezers were filled with body parts, animals that had been illegally hunted. But a few months after that weekend, it was already ancient history for us. My grandfather lived another 28 years. When he passed, he left me over $40,000 and his first pickup truck. I used part of the money to get it back in great running condition. I'm going to take my grandson to go do parking lot donuts one day. I also took some of my grandfather's records and books. Among those were his journals. It seems like he enjoyed spending time with me as much as I did him. Additionally, inside one of those journals is where I first learned this entire story. But at the end of it all, I still had one question. And I had to take it to Uncle Ray. After all, he was there. I pulled him aside at our next family picnic. I asked about the woman's screams he and Granddad heard. His eyes widened. He started to move his mouth, but nothing came out. Then after a few seconds, he tucked his lips in all together and just shrugged his shoulders. Uncle Ray walked away from me and grabbed a napkin. I watched him walk out the park gates as he wiped tears from his face. Then he climbed into his car and drove off. He was gone over an hour. When he came back, he acted as if nothing ever happened. Then at the end of the night, as everyone was saying their goodbyes, my uncle pulled me aside. He told me there was a folder in his trunk. Inside was the story about that experience that he had typed up nearly 3 decades ago. He told me I was free to read it if I wanted to. I asked him what the differences between his and my grandfather's versions were. Uncle Ray looked around to ensure no one was in earshot. He then looked back at me. Your granddad always maintained he couldn't see anyone strapped down to that underground table. But I could. Uncle Ray patted me on the shoulder. Go slow, he said.